guys, Marissa Stone here with the Systems Lounge and Simon Says Social. And in this video, we are going to talk all about those 4 components that each customer journey needs in order to be successful. So we're going to take a much deeper dive into what those might look like. So let me begin by sharing my screen. Before you get too overwhelmed, the first thing I want to say to you is you've got this. I can help. So if this sounds like, oh my gosh, I can never accomplish all of this, don't worry about it, because I'm going to help support you throughout the entire process of creating your own customer journey. So do not worry a bit. You got this. I can help. Remember when we talked about how 90% of the customer journey is self-directed? And we talked a little bit about figuring out who our target audience is and what resources we have that will solve their problem. Well, this brings us to these 4 crucial components that every customer journey must have. It must have an inventory of resources and be knowledgeable about the touch points, right? You should know what your resources are, and you should know where people are coming into your customer journey. You should have an idea in your brain about what the design of your customer journey model is going to look like. Now, this model is simply for you. It's kind of like creating a prototype of a product or service before you release the product or service. This customer journey model is going to help you to set things up in your space so that as a new prospect comes through your company, they are going to be able to stick around. They are going to want to stick around. They're going to want to learn more about you. They're going to want to engage, and they are going to want to purchase. And you're going to have the opportunity to influence that buyer decision at that moment. You're going to need to make sure that those touch points are actually added to the model, because the bottom line is if we don't know where we're headed, if we don't have some sort of blueprint or some sort of map to where we're going, we absolutely won't get there. And by adding these touch points to this model, you're going to be able to visually see exactly where people are going to be coming in to your customer journey, right? Those are all the places you're taking your potential clients to lunch. Remember in the last video that we used the analogy of this is very similar to setting up a lunch date with somebody or going to an event with somebody or whatever. This is the same exact thing, only those lunch dates and those dinner dates and meeting for cocktails or whatever it is you're doing, those are touch points in the virtual space, if that makes sense. And then the 4th crucial component is this process by which you will implement and then listen so that you know how people are reacting to this customer journey so that you can add more support and scaffolding if you need to, or remove things that aren't working, or provide a new product or service because you see that a large number of your clients or customers need that, right? So we talked a little bit about your resources and touch points. What we didn't really dive into is how the customer is truly in control. And we've talked a little bit about how the customers can enter at any stage and how the journey is not really linear anymore. It's really an explosion of touch points where people can, come through, learn about you, decide what they want, from your product or service list and then engage and purchase. So what we haven't really talked about is truly choosing the right model for your business and for your customers. And only you know what this model looks like. Only you can decide whether or not it's a jagged journey where there are pretty sharp peaks where people go from being super elated to plummeting. That's more my model, because when I introduce them to a new product or a new service or a new piece of technology, they're like, and they can't really do it at first. And then they start playing around with it and they slowly make their way back up to the summit. And they're super stoked about the way that this technology or this business system works for them. So you want to make sure that you choose that correct model, because that's going to determine how you interact with them via all these touch points. And you want to deliver and define all of these, resources based on your customer's point of view. So this isn't about you. I might say to myself, okay, in order to, for a client that really works to schedule, discovery calls or whatever with their clients, right? They, one product that I might put them in touch with or teach them how to use is Acuity scheduling. So I can't say, oh, they're going to need to do this first and this second and this third. It's really based on the customer's point of view. Some people might use the blocking feature on their calendar and other people might not. Some people might set up intake forms for their clients or their new potential clients, and other people might not. Some people may choose that they're going to, collect payment prior to, their online sessions with their clients, and others might not. So I don't get to choose what they use. I get to provide them with all of the ways in which they can use Acuity scheduling, but I can't tell them how to use it. So think about that when you're selling your widget or whatever it is you're selling. You might tell somebody this is a great widget and it's going to do a great job of, getting stuff off of the window of your car so you can drive when it's cold and snowy outside, but they may not want it for outside and on their car. They might want to use it in their shower to get the, the sub scum off the wall. I don't know. You don't get to choose how somebody is going to use your product or service. You have to provide the information and create this customer journey from the customer's point of view. That's why when early on we first started talking about this, I said that this is an opportunity for you to take a walk in your customer's shoes. That means you have to remove yourself from the equation. Don't remove the part of you that is the educator, that is the supporter, the teacher, those sorts of things, but certainly try to create something that is from your customer's point of view. Consider all questions and or barriers to purchase, right? So a lot of my clients might offer, okay, here's a product or service or program and here's the price point. But for those of you that are not in a position to pay the full amount right now, I can do a payment plan. I offer you a payment plan. That is removing a barrier to purchase, right? They are saying you can purchase this at a lower amount every month for the next 3, 5, 6 months, whatever it is, right? So that it's easier for that client to be able to factor this new product or service into their budget. So think about all the questions and all the barriers that might be in place that are preventing your client from, making that move and from purchasing your product or service. Do your best to encompass all scenarios. Now, there's absolutely no way to know it all. Hindsight's always 20/20, and so certainly be looking at your past clients and your past customers' experiences and apply this to what you're doing today. But there's no way that we can know it all. So what we want to do is do our best to encompass all scenarios. So I know if I'm introducing somebody to, say, ClickFunnels, there's a much steeper learning curve to using ClickFunnels than, say, there is to learning how to use Acuity scheduling or learning how to use Canva, for instance, right? So I know I'm encompassing more support and more scaffolding inside the program that teaches somebody how to use ClickFunnels than I am inside the programming that perhaps will teach somebody to use Acuity scheduling. So keep those things in mind. Understand your client's problems and pain points. Remember early on when we talked about the difference between the problems that the mother of two would experience versus the problems that the young man climbing the corporate ladder would experience? Those are two completely different types of people. And that means their problems are going to be completely different. Now, it's easy to deduce that most moms of two are going to experience very similar problems. Most young men climbing the corporate ladder are also going to experience very similar problems. But understanding those problems and pain points of your customer is going to help you create this process of which you're going to build the know, like, and trust factor in them and create this rapport that is going to create a lifelong relationship between you and this new client. So try to understand those pain points and those problem areas and find solutions for them. Understanding what's been their solution in the past or what's been past customer solutions is going, and why those are no longer working, is going to help you create new solutions or implement new ways of doing the same solution so that it will solve their problem, right? And then you also want to think through and understand their buying triggers. What's going to make them say, okay, this is the thing that I need to purchase in order to be able to solve my problem? What are those points? And again, going back to the data that already exists, your current clients or your past clients, understanding what made them go ahead and purchase, right? Was it an extra set of bonuses? Was it some one-on-one time with you? What was it that really made them say, okay, I really need this in my life? And making sure that you're applying that throughout your customer journey as you're trying to get them to purchase different items, different products, and different services throughout the process. The next thing you're going to need to do is choose your model. It is super, super important to make sure that your model goes along with what's going on with your client, right? I know that my model is a jagged journey, right? So it's very much up here. There are times that my people are very elated and very excited, and there are times that my people have plummeted to the bottom of that learning curve, and they're going to have to dig their way back up, right? And we all know that there's a certain level of that with most purchases, right? But for me, it's much more pronounced. Like when they hit a peak, they're doing great, and when they plummet to the bottom, it's a hard fall. So I understand that about my customers, and that way I can help them. So along that back, scaling that next summit, I'm helping them to really, take those steps that they need to be taking to understand the system that I'm introducing them to so that they can utilize it themselves. By knowing your clients and customers, you'll know whether or not you're a sine wave, whether or not you're a more linear process where it's pretty straight and dry, whether or not or pretty cut and dry, whether or not you're a spiral and that spiral has another little curve on it that circles them back around to purchase the next thing, whether or not you're actually a full-on circle. Like, you're going to begin to understand what that model should look like. And it's going to be different for everybody. Don't think that just because your colleague over here has a jagged journey that you're not going to have a spiral. It just doesn't work that way. It really depends on the customer journey that you are inviting your customer to enter into and the ways in which your product or service or company impacts their lives at each given moment inside that customer journey. So make sure that you try to really look at a number of different models. And I have a number of different models here, and there's more inside your workbook that you have access to. So really take a look at this and try to determine, okay, what is it that, that my customer journey model is going to look like, right? Understand that part of creating this customer journey is also understanding what your customer is feeling at each given moment inside the customer journey. Now, certainly not every moment of the day, but like when they go from one step to the next, if they've met you for lunch and the next step is, to perhaps set another date and meet for dinner, how are they feeling when they leave that lunch date, right? Are they excited? Do they see the possibilities? Are they ready to work with you? Like, what does it look like? There is no requirement that states that your customer has to be happy the entire time. My customers are not happy the entire time. They do hit those learning curves, and sometimes those learning curves are difficult. Indicate areas on your customer journey map where your customer might plummet, might fall, might become a little bit unhappy, and try to create a support network or a support system or some sort of scaffolding that is going to help your customer through that difficult period. There is an old saying that says, nothing worth having is ever easy. The same thing happens when you are inviting your customer to come through your company. None of it is easy, right? Life isn't easy. Nobody gets a get out of life free card. So by helping to support them as they're going through some of these more uneasy processes inside your customer journey, they are going to be so much more grateful to have you in their lives. And you're building that solid know, like, and trust factor, that solid rapport, and you're creating a client that is going to turn into a brand advocate later. So understanding what your customer is feeling at each given stage of the customer journey is going to serve you very, very well. Understanding what their pain points are throughout the customer journey and those opportunities for you to support them are also going to serve you very well. Then you're going to add some finishing touches. How long do you predict that this customer journey is going to take from start to finish? For me and my clients, it depends on the process. Sometimes it's a couple of weeks, sometimes it's a couple of days, sometimes it's 6 weeks, sometimes it's a full year. It really depends on the customer and what they're buying into and what they're getting from me, right? What tools will you use to measure these touch points along the way? Because that's a really important piece. Measuring the ways in which people interact with the different steps inside your customer journey is going to tell you whether they're in a happy place or whether they've plummeted to a not so happy place. And by measuring those and seeing what people are doing and engaging and seeing how they're reacting to the different things that are happening inside the customer journey, that's going to help you create a much better customer journey for them, right? If you invite somebody to lunch and you guys end up, with a really bad server and the food is horrible and it's cold and you're sitting outside or whatever those little pieces are, right? Those may have nothing to do with you, but the fact that the two of you met for lunch that day and all of those negative things happen during your lunch date, that kind of puts the burden on you to try and have a do-over, right? Well, let's go to a different restaurant next time. Let's pick a different time of day. Let's do things differently this time to make it a more pleasant experience. You're going to do the same thing in the virtual space through touch points, right? You want to work hard when you're listening and you're measuring to capture those attitudes and emotions. If you're on your lunch date and it's freezing cold outside, I, for one, would be miserable. So it doesn't matter what the conversation is. I'm probably not going to remember it because I'm a baby in the cold. And so understanding that my attitude and emotion with regard to cold weather and sitting outside to eat is not going to be a great one, right? So you would be able to then think about that. And when you invite me to come to, say, dinner somewhere, you're going to provide a nice warm spot, perhaps sitting at a booth by a fire or something else, knowing, that I'm a baby in the cold and I might require something a little warmer. Capture those attitudes and emotions as you're going through the customer journey so that you can help support and scaffold and create a positive space for your clients to walk through. Look for opportunities that help you walk in their shoes, right? If like I know my clients are going to have a learning curve with whatever the technologies are that I'm teaching them. So by knowing that, sitting down and physically over the shoulder walking them through it is going to be a much smarter way for me to engage with them than just saying, okay, here's the business system, figure it out, I'll see you later, right? Set up ways in which to listen and gather this feedback. You might create polls in your Facebook group, or you might, ask clients face-to-face, or perhaps you put a little survey together at the end of an email, or perhaps you just invite them to share feedback, right? Or perhaps you sit back, you set up some Google alerts and sit back and let that information come to you. Figure out processes in which you're going to listen and gather feedback so that you know how people are feeling as they're going through your customer journey. And then find ways that are going to help you to focus on their needs. There's a difference between felt needs and ascribed needs. And a lot of us in business tend to ascribe needs to our clients, right? If I'm trying to teach you how to implement a business system, I'm going to understand that you need this and this and this, and those are the 3 steps you need, and I need to make sure you do those. If I stop and listen to the felt needs, the needs that the client is saying, I really need to know how to do this, I might find that 3-step process is actually a 10-step process, right? So by understanding the difference between ascribed and felt needs and really focusing on those felt needs, again, you're going to build that know, like, and trust factor, and you are going to create some significant rapport with that client, and they will become a brand advocate later. So think through how you can support them to accomplish their goals so that they become a lifelong customer. And then take all of this information and figure out how you can improve that customer journey over time. And this is where some of my clients have figured out, okay, this was a great product or service in the beginning, but now my audience has evolved out of needing this, and I'm going to eliminate that from my list of products or services, and I'm going to transition to these products and services over here. So by improving that customer journey over time, you are growing alongside your audience, and your audience is able to accomplish their goals as they go through this customer journey that you have created for them. So in the next video, we are going to talk a lot more about, we're going to dive into your workbook, and we're going to talk a lot more about how we can begin to implement some of what we've learned inside these 4 crucial components. So I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.